Not wearing budget outfits to Dad's gala, my sister sneered and blocked me. Moments later, Dad's top backer entered, bowed, and said, "Madam CEO, I had no idea this was your father's event." What happened next was, they called me the family disappointment, turned me away from my father's lavish 60th birthday party just because of my clothes. But what they couldn't possibly grasp was that I was secretly the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, a company that had just, unbeknownst to them, saved his entire life's work from collapsing. The moment that truth finally shattered their illusion, it changed everything. That night, the Lakeview Country Club glowed like a jewel box under the Seattle sky, its manicured lawns bristling with the kind of luxury cars my family believed defined success. Inside, a world of glittering diamonds and bespoke suits awaited, a world I was about to enter, not as an outcast, but as an unsuspecting architect of their future. Before I dive into the chaos of that night, let me take you back. If you've ever felt the sting of being judged for simply being yourself, especially by those who should know you best, then hit subscribe and join me on this journey of a lifetime. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. My name is Chloe Sutton, I'm 32, and for years, my success was my best-kept secret from my family. They truly believed I was struggling simply because I didn't parade around in designer labels or drive some flashy, high-end car. Tonight, at my father David's 60th birthday bash, an extravagant affair where appearances were everything, I decided to dress simply one last time. A final, silent test of their values before I finally revealed the magnitude of my world. What happened next? It was more dramatic than I ever could have imagined. Growing up, our lives weren't always draped in wealth. My childhood unfolded in a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland. My father, David, poured his life into his small manufacturing company, working grueling 60-hour weeks, just relentlessly chasing that dream of success. My mother, Eleanor, a stay-at-home mom, was a magician with a budget, stretching every single dollar for my sister Madison and me. We weren't poor, no, but we certainly weren't rich. Back then, David championed hard work and cherished family time. Sunday dinners were sacred, and he instilled in us a profound belief that character truly mattered more than any possession. Everything shifted when I was 15. Dad's company unexpectedly landed a massive contract, and suddenly, money started pouring in like a flood. Within months, we relocated to an expansive, almost ostentatious house in an exclusive neighborhood. The transformation that swept through my family was both swift and jarring. David traded his reliable old Ford for a gleaming Mercedes. Eleanor, once content with cozy family meals, began hosting lavish, performative dinner parties. But no one, absolutely no one, changed as dramatically as my older sister, Madison. Madison, 2 years my senior, embraced our newfound status with an almost disturbing fervor. Her old friends were swiftly discarded for the popular crowd, her modest wardrobe replaced by an endless parade of designer everything. She became utterly obsessed with projecting an image. "It's not just about having money," she'd lecture me, her voice dripping with newfound authority. "It's about showing it." Eleanor, rather than challenging this burgeoning new value system, quietly enabled it. Madison's every social climbing endeavor was met with approval, shopping sprees, and praise. Mom would even gently suggest I put more effort into my appearance, that I should try to make connections with the right people. Their definition of right people always revolved around wealth and status. While my family was busy reinventing themselves into a glossy, superficial image, I felt increasingly alienated. The bedrock values I'd been raised with seemed to vanish overnight, replaced by this suffocating obsession with image. When I turned 18 and left for college, it was more than a relief. It felt like an escape. I chose to study computer science at a state university, completely sidestepping the prestigious private school my parents had lobbied for. "You're throwing away opportunities," David had said, his disappointment palpable. What he failed to understand was that I wasn't throwing anything away, I was chasing my true passion. Computers, unlike people, made perfect sense to me. Code didn't judge you based on your clothes or your friends. It simply worked or it didn't. End of story. College wasn't easy. I juggled multiple jobs while maintaining a full course load. There were nights I survived purely on vending machine snacks, coding furiously until sunrise in the quiet hum of the computer lab. My family, during my infrequent weekend visits, interpreted my exhaustion as undeniable evidence of my struggle, their quiet judgments hanging heavy in the air. They had no idea that between classes and shifts at the campus coffee shop, I was meticulously building my very first software application, piece by painful piece. During my junior year, I developed a neural interface algorithm that, to my surprise, caught the attention of several brilliant professors. With their enthusiastic encouragement, I entered a national innovation competition and, against all odds, I won. The prize money, though modest, became the crucial seed funding for what would eventually grow into Neurasync Technologies. Starting the company from my tiny apartment's spare bedroom wasn't glamorous. I ate ramen noodles for weeks straight, literally, just to afford server space. When my family called, I kept conversations deliberately brief, desperately trying to avoid explaining that I couldn't visit because every spare dollar, every spare ounce of energy, was being poured back into the business. Still wearing those same old jeans? Madison would tease during video calls, her voice laced with mock concern. You know, they make new clothes every season, right? What my family couldn't see, or simply refused to acknowledge, was the relentless, explosive growth of Neurasync. Our neural interface technology was nothing short of revolutionary, enabling unprecedented human-computer interaction. Just 5 short years after founding the company from that cramped spare bedroom, we had blossomed into a global leader, boasting over 300 employees and a valuation exceeding $2 billion. Throughout this incredible journey, I made a deliberate choice to keep my success a profound secret from my family. It wasn't about orchestrating some dramatic reveal, not at first. Initially, I simply didn't want to share news they would inevitably dismiss or diminish. Later, as my success soared, a quiet curiosity began to grow within me. Would they ever value me for who I was, truly, not just for what I possessed? Their constant, subtle judgments of my ordinary lifestyle became an unintentional, unspoken test of character that they, time and again, consistently failed. The ultimate irony, a twist of fate so profound it felt like a cosmic joke, unfolded 6 months ago. David's company, Hayes Manufacturing, began to struggle, caught in a perfect storm of market shifts and glaring mismanagement. Through my industry contacts, I learned he was desperately scrambling for investors, his once proud empire teetering on the brink. After careful consideration and extensive consultations with my board, Neurasync discreetly acquired Hayes Manufacturing through a shell corporation. The terms were fair, objectively better than he would have received anywhere else. And just like that, without David ever knowing, I became my own father's boss. Every Sunday, I still dutifully attended family dinner at my parents' sprawling mansion. These meals, however, had long since devolved into predictable, almost theatrical performances. David would boast about his latest business connections, subtly inflating his importance. Eleanor would proudly showcase her newest luxury purchases, her designer bags and glittering jewelry practically demanding admiration. Madison would sweep in, usually with a new, equally well-dressed boyfriend in tow, adorned in a fresh designer outfit. And without fail, all of them would find increasingly subtle, yet unmistakably pointed, ways to comment on my simple clothing and practical car. "Chloe, darling, don't you think it's time for a professional makeover?" Eleanor would suggest, her eyes sweeping over my minimal makeup and naturally wavy hair with a feigned maternal concern that hid sharp judgment. "Still driving that Japanese economy car?" David would offer, his voice dripping with faux worry, "I know a dealer who could get you something far more impressive." "God, Chloe, that sweater is just so practical," Madison would sigh, somehow making the word practical sound like a crushing insult. I absorbed these comments weakly, a slow, grinding erosion of my patience, watching them judge not just me, but everyone around them, through the narrow, suffocating lens of wealth display. When David mentioned his upcoming 60th birthday celebration, describing it grandly as the networking event of the season, I knew, with a sudden, crystal clear certainty that this was it. This was the perfect, painful opportunity to finally end the charade. The invitation arrived on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with elegant gold lettering. Join us for an evening of elegance celebrating David Sutton's 60th birthday. The dress code, underlined for emphasis, read, "Formal attire. Excellence expected." Madison, ever the watchful gatekeeper, texted separately, "Please, for once, wear something appropriate. Dad's inviting everyone who matters." As I placed the opulent invitation on my sleek desk in my corner office, overlooking the vast, glittering Seattle skyline, my decision solidified. I would attend the party. But I wouldn't, absolutely would not, play dress-up. After years of their relentless, shallow judgment, it was time for my family to see me for who I truly was, successful or not, designer clothes or not. This was about something far deeper than fabric. The morning of David's birthday party dawned clear and bright. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my downtown penthouse, illuminating a space that perfectly reflected my personal aesthetic. Clean lines, thoughtfully selected art, comfortable yet elegant furniture, nothing flashy or ostentatious like my parents' gold-trimmed, marble-filled mansion. Every piece in my home was quality, chosen with intention and care, not for mere show. I sipped my coffee on the balcony, watching the city awaken below, a faint, bittersweet irony not lost on me. I could afford to buy and sell most of the guests attending tonight's party. Yet, in my family's eyes, I was still the unsuccessful one, the family disappointment who just couldn't seem to get her act together. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, my best friend since college and now Neurasync's brilliant co-founder. "Today's the day. Ready for the big reveal?" Her message read. I typed back, a wry smile playing on my lips, as ready as I'll ever be. My phone immediately rang. Sophia, true to form, was never one for lengthy text conversations. "I still think you should just show up in your power suit with a company car and get it over with," she said without preamble, her voice brimming with her usual no-nonsense logic. "This game has gone on long enough." "It's not a game," I replied, though I understood her frustration completely. "It's about principle. I want them to accept me for who I am, not what I have, not what I project." "Chloe," Sophia said gently, her tone softening, "they've been judging you for years. Remember last year's birthday dinner?" The memory surfaced immediately, a sharp, unwelcome pang. Madison examining my simple black dress with a critical, almost surgical eye, then loudly proclaiming to everyone at the restaurant, "You should dress like success, not like stress, Chloe. No wonder you're still single." "I remember," I said quietly, the old wound aching anew. "And you're still giving them chances," Sophia pointed out, a hint of exasperation in her voice. "That's either very forgiving or slightly masochistic." "Maybe both," I admitted with a small, weary laugh. "But tonight's different. After the acquisition is fully announced next week, they'll know everything anyway. I just want one last chance for them to see me without the CEO title coloring their perception." Sophia sighed, a sound of resigned acceptance. "Fine. But I'll have my phone ready for your rescue call." "And Chloe," she added, her voice firm, "they're the ones who should be seeking your approval, not the other way around." After hanging up, I walked to my spacious closet to select my outfit for the evening. It was a walk-in, filled with everything from casual wear to designer gowns reserved for industry galas. For tonight, I deliberately chose quality but simple clothes, my favorite dark jeans, a crisp white silk blouse, and a perfectly tailored blazer. No logos, no flash, just clean, classic style. My only jewelry would be the small, cherished pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. As I laid the outfit on my bed, my work phone rang. It was Michael Chin, one of Neurasync's major investors and a highly respected, almost legendary figure in the tech world. He was also, coincidentally, the very investor David had been desperately trying to court for the past year. "Chloe, sorry to bother you on a Saturday," Michael began, his voice warm but businesslike. "No problem, Michael. What's up?" I responded, a slight unease beginning to prickle at me. "I just remembered, your father's David Sutton, correct? Of Hayes Manufacturing?" "Yes," I confirmed, a knot forming in my stomach. Where was this going? Well, I'm attending a birthday party for a David Sutton tonight. Country club on the east side. That wouldn't be your father, would it? I couldn't help a nervous laugh at the incredible, almost cruel, coincidence. One and the same. Well, that's convenient, Michael mused. I've been meaning to discuss the integration timeline for Hayes Manufacturing. Perhaps we could chat briefly at the party? Kill two birds with one stone, as they say. This complicated matters immensely. Michael knew me as the CEO of Neurasync, the formidable leader of a tech empire, not as the underachieving daughter my family believed me to be. If he approached me at the party using my professional title, the revelation would happen whether I was ready or not. Michael, there's something you should know, I began, and then, with a heavy heart, I explained the intricate, dysfunctional situation with my family. There was a long, thoughtful pause before he responded. Let me get this straight, he finally said, his voice laced with disbelief. Your family has no idea you run one of the most innovative tech companies in the country, and they think you're, what? Struggling. Basically, I confirmed, my voice small. Richard's laugh boomed through the phone, full and genuine. That's either the most humble or the most passive-aggressive thing I've ever heard. I'm not sure which. Maybe a bit of both, I admitted, a genuine smile finally touching my lips. Well, I'll play along if I see you there, he promised. But Chloe, for what it's worth, you shouldn't have to hide your success from anyone, especially family. After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen island, my laptop open, reviewing the quarterly projections for my father's company. The business he'd painstakingly built from nothing was now struggling under the crushing weight of his increasingly outdated management style and his focus on superficial appearances over genuine substance. The reports confirmed what I already knew with a sickening certainty. Without Neurasync's intervention, Hayes Manufacturing would have faced bankruptcy within the year. A complex question gnawed at me. Was I helping him out of familial duty, pure business opportunity, or was it something else entirely? Perhaps a hidden, vulnerable part of me wanted him to know that his underachieving daughter had built something substantial enough to save his life's work. The thought made me profoundly uncomfortable. I prided myself on making business decisions based purely on merit, not on messy, unpredictable emotion. As evening approached, a cold dread began to settle in. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept stubbornly returning to the impending confrontation. Finally, I closed my laptop, got dressed, and headed to my practical, reliable Audi. No driver tonight, though I occasionally used the company car service for business events. The drive to Lakeview Country Club took 40 minutes, giving me ample, agonizing time to rehearse various scenarios in my head. A small, hopeful part of me prayed my family would finally see past appearances. The rational, more jaded part knew they probably wouldn't. The country club came into view, its manicured grounds bathed in the warm glow of thousands of twinkling lights. Luxury cars, Bentleys, Porsches, the occasional Ferrari, lined the circular driveway. Valets in crisp uniforms scurried to accommodate the arriving guests, many of whom were dressed as if attending a Hollywood gala rather than a birthday party. I pulled up in my Audi, noting the barely concealed surprise, bordering on disdain, on the young valet's face when I handed him my keys after watching him park a gleaming Maserati. Already, the judgment was beginning, and I hadn't even entered the building. The grand entrance to the country club was adorned with floral arrangements that probably cost more than a month's rent for most people. Crystal champagne fountains flanked the doorway, and ice sculptures, meticulously carved into the shape of my father's company logo, glistened under strategic lighting. Subtle, it was not. For a brief, terrifying moment, a wave of insecurity washed over me. Was I making a huge mistake? Would it really be so terrible to have just worn an expensive dress, just to keep the peace? Then I remembered all the Sunday dinners, all the snide comments, all the years of relentless judgment. No, this was not a mistake. It was time for authenticity, whatever the painful consequences. Squaring my shoulders, I walked toward the entrance, my resolve hardening with every step. The closer I got, the more obvious the judgmental glances became. Two women in designer gowns whispered behind manicured hands as I passed. A business associate of David's did a double take, his expression morphing from recognition to confusion to thinly veiled disdain as he took in my simple outfit. I kept walking, refusing to be intimidated. The marble foyer of the country club opened before me, with its soaring ceilings and a colossal crystal chandelier. Through the open double doors, I could see the main ballroom, buzzing with expensively dressed guests, women dripping in jewels, men in bespoke suits. And then I spotted my sister, Madison, stationed near the entrance like a glamorous sentinel. She wore a stunning red designer gown that probably cost more than a decent used car, her dark hair styled in an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears. The moment her eyes landed on me, her perfectly made-up face contorted in sheer horror. Before I could even reach the doorway, she rushed forward, physically positioning herself to block my path. "What are you wearing?" she hissed, her voice low but intensely furious. "Are you serious right now, Chloe?" I glanced down at my outfit, then back at her. "Hello to you too, Madison." "Don't play cute," she snapped, her eyes darting nervously over my blazer and jeans. "This is Dad's big night. Everyone who matters in his industry is here. You can't come in like that." "Like what?" I asked, keeping my voice infuriatingly calm. "Clean, presentable, and on time? No cheap clothes at Dad's party," she declared, crossing her arms defensively. "You know the dress code was formal. This is deliberate provocation." Several nearby guests were now openly watching our exchange, their curiosity poorly disguised. I could feel my cheeks warming, but I absolutely refused to show any embarrassment. "My clothes aren't cheap, Madison," I said, my voice steady. "They're simple. There's a difference." "Simple." She practically spat the word, her anger barely contained. "This is the most important night of Dad's year. He's trying to impress investors. How does it look when his own daughter shows up looking like she's going to a coffee shop?" "Maybe," I replied evenly. "It shows that some people value substance over surface. Success isn't about what you wear." Madison let out a bitter, derisive laugh. "Success? What would you know about success? The rest of us are actually building something with our lives while you're still dressing like a college student. It's embarrassing." That stung, even though I knew the truth. Judging people by their appearance is what's truly embarrassing. "Madison, save the life lessons." She glanced over her shoulder, then waved frantically. Dad, we have a situation." My father, David, appeared moments later, resplendent in a tuxedo, his silver hair perfectly styled. For a fleeting moment, seeing him approach with a warm smile, I felt a flicker of irrational hope that he might, just might, defend me. That hope was extinguished the instant his eyes registered my outfit. "Chloe," he said, his voice dropping with palpable disappointment. "What is this?" "Happy birthday, Dad," I replied, trying desperately to maintain my composure. "You look well. Don't change the subject." He gestured angrily at my clothes. "Everyone is dressed appropriately except you. Is this some kind of statement?" "It's not a statement. They're just clothes." "It's disrespectful," he countered, his voice hardening, each word a physical blow. "You knew this was important to me, important to the family." "I didn't realize family acceptance had a dress code," I said quietly, a tremor in my voice. His face reddened slightly. "This isn't just a family gathering. It's a networking event. I have potential investors here, business associates, and they'll judge your entire company by what your daughter wears. First impressions matter in business. You'd know that if you'd ever built anything substantial." The casual cruelty of his remark hung in the air between us, a cold, suffocating silence. Several more guests had paused, their conversations dying, to openly observe our confrontation. From the corner of my eye, I could see Eleanor approaching, concern etched on her perfectly maintained face. "David, what's happening?" she asked, then noticed me. "Oh, Chloe, you're here." The pause before "here" spoke volumes, a silent judgment hanging in the air. "She showed up like this," Madison explained, gesturing wildly at my outfit as if I were wearing rags instead of perfectly presentable clothes. Eleanor's expression fell, her eyes widening in distress. "Oh dear, Chloe, sweetheart, I'm sure we can find you something to wear. Perhaps one of the staff has a spare uniform dress." The suggestion that a server's uniform would be preferable to my current outfit was the final, crushing straw. "I'm not changing," I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. "Either I'm welcome as I am, or I'm not welcome at all." David's jaw tightened as he glanced around at the growing number of onlookers. I could practically see him calculating the social cost of the scene versus the cost of allowing me to enter as I was. Business, predictably, won out over compassion. "I think it would be best if you came back when you're dressed appropriately," he said stiffly, his eyes cold. "This is an important night for me." "David," Eleanor began, a plea in her voice, but he silenced her with a sharp look. "It's my birthday, my event, my rules," he insisted, his voice resonating with an unyielding authority. "Chloe knows what's expected in this family." I stood there, absorbing the full, brutal impact of his rejection. Despite having prepared myself for this exact possibility, the pain was still acute, a searing wound. My own father was turning me away from his birthday party because my clothes weren't expensive enough, because I didn't fit his carefully constructed image. "I see," I said finally, my voice surprisingly steady. "Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you get everything you deserve tonight." I turned to leave, feeling the scorching weight of hundreds of stares on my back. David called after me, perhaps a flicker of regret in his voice, but Madison was already ushering him back inside, whispering reassurances that they were doing the right thing. Rather than leaving entirely, an impulsive decision, I decided to wait. I found my way to the garden terrace adjacent to the main building. Part of me wanted nothing more than to get in my car and drive away, never to return. But another part, the stronger part, the CEO part, knew that running away would solve nothing. I hadn't built a successful company by avoiding difficult situations. Finding a quiet bench, partially concealed by ornamental shrubs, I sat down and pulled out my phone. Work, as it so often was, would be my refuge. Several emails required my immediate attention, including updates on the Hayes manufacturing integration plans. The irony, a bitter, biting thing, was not lost on me. I was sitting outside my father's party, handling the intricate details of his company's salvation. As I responded to messages, I fought to control the tempest of emotions churning inside me, anger at my family's crushing shallowness, searing hurt at being rejected so publicly, and yes, even a shameful pinch of anticipation about their inevitable, explosive discovery of my success. Would validation from them even mean anything now? Should it? For years, I'd told myself I was keeping my success private to avoid their materialism. But sitting alone in that cool garden, I had to confront a harder, more painful truth. Part of me had been waiting, desperately, for them to value me without the trappings of success, to love me for who I was, not what I had. Tonight had definitively, brutally, answered that question. The garden terrace, in stark contrast to the party's chaos, offered a strange sense of peace. Soft landscape lighting illuminated flowering shrubs and a small ornamental pond. From here, I could hear the muted sounds of the party, clinking glasses, distant orchestral music, polite, artificial laughter, the world I had been deemed unworthy to enter. I focused intently on my phone, responding to urgent emails from the development team about our latest neural interface prototype. Technology problems, I mused, were refreshingly straightforward compared to family dynamics. Code either worked or it didn't. There were no hidden agendas, no shifting expectations. A text from Sophia lit up my screen. "How's it going? Do I need to organize a rescue mission?" I smiled despite myself, a genuine, small smile, and typed back, officially banned from the party for looking too poor. Currently hiding in the garden like some modern Cinderella, minus the fairy godmother. Her response came immediately, "Their loss. Want me to send a helicopter to pick you up? We could make quite an entrance." Tempting, I replied, but I think I'll wait a bit longer. Something tells me this night isn't over yet. As if on cue, I heard the crunch of shoes on the garden path. Looking up, I was surprised, then intrigued, to see Michael Chin approaching. In his early 60s, Michael possessed the quiet, confident bearing of someone utterly comfortable in his own skin. Unlike many of the ostentatiously dressed guests, he wore a simple but impeccably tailored dark suit with a blue tie. No flashy accessories, no obvious displays of wealth, though I knew his net worth exceeded $1 billion. His expression registered genuine surprise when he spotted me. "Miss Sutton, what are you doing out here?" he asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. I stood to greet him. "Michael, I didn't expect to see you so soon." He closed the distance between us, then, to my utter shock, gave a small, respectful bow. "Madam Chairman," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I didn't know this was your father's celebration." The formality of his address, using my official title as the head of Neurosink's board, was a stark, almost absurd contrast to how my family had just treated me. "Please, it's just Chloe tonight," I said, a slight tremor in my voice, gesturing for him to join me on the bench. "Why are you sitting out here alone?" he asked, genuine concern now replacing his confusion. "The party's inside." I gave him a brief, unvarnished account of what had transpired at the entrance. His expression grew increasingly incredulous as I spoke, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Let me understand this correctly," he said when I finished, a low rumble in his voice. "Your father and sister refused to let you attend his birthday party because of your clothes. The same father whose company you recently saved from bankruptcy." "He doesn't know about that yet," I reminded him, a sudden surge of heat in my cheeks. "The acquisition hasn't been publicly announced." Michael shook his head slowly, a deep, frustrated sigh escaping his lips. "Even so, the chairman of Neurosink, one of the most innovative tech companies in the country, banned from a party for not looking wealthy enough. It's absurd." His indignation on my behalf was oddly comforting, a balm to my raw emotions. "Welcome to my family dynamic," I said with a wry, tired smile. "You know," Michael remarked, a glint in his eye, "I've been trying to get a meeting with your father for months. Hayes Manufacturing has potential, but his management approach is outdated. I was actually considering investing myself before I learned Neurosink had acquired them." "He's been quite eager to meet you," I confirmed, unable to suppress a small, ironic smile. "Your name comes up at nearly every family dinner." Michael's eyebrows rose, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Does it now?" And yet he is no. Idea, his daughter, is not only my business associate, but effectively my boss in several investment ventures. "Life is full of ironies," I said, gazing out at the softly lit garden. He studied me for a moment, his gaze piercing. "You could have told them at any time," he observed, his voice quiet. "Used your position to force their respect. Why didn't you?" The question made me pause, forcing me to confront the complicated layers of my own motivations. "I guess I wanted to be valued for who I am," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper, "not what I've achieved or what I own." "Naive, perhaps." "Not naive," Michael countered, his voice firm, principled. "It's the same quality that makes you an exceptional CEO. You value substance over appearance, long-term vision over quick impressions." He stood suddenly, straightening his jacket with a decisive motion. "Well, I didn't dress up and drive all the way out here not to attend this party. And I certainly don't do business with people who would treat my most valued business associate this way." "Michael, you don't have to." I started, a wave of apprehension washing over me. "I absolutely do," he interrupted firmly. "Besides, I think it's time for a small lesson in looking beyond appearances, don't you?" I hesitated, torn between the visceral desire to avoid further confrontation and the dawning recognition that this situation would never improve without addressing it directly. "You know," Michael said, more gently now, his eyes twinkling slightly, "early in my career, I was thrown out of a potential investor's office because I arrived on public transit instead of in a fancy car. The receptionist assumed I was a delivery person." He straightened his tie, a confident, almost regal gesture. 2 years later, I bought that company. That made me genuinely smile, a burst of warmth spreading through me. "What did you do with the receptionist?" "Promoted her, actually. She had excellent organizational skills once she stopped judging people by their transportation choices." He offered his arm in an old-fashioned, chivalrous gesture. "Shall we?" Drawing a deep breath, steeling myself, I nodded and stood. "Let's go face the music." Together, we walked back toward the entrance, my thoughts swirling with a potent mix of anxiety and grim determination. Whatever happened next, I knew, would permanently alter my relationship with my family. For better or worse, the truth was about to come out. As we approached the entrance, I could see Madison still stationed there, like a glamorous, self-appointed bouncer, now chatting animatedly with a group of David's business associates. Her laughter cut off abruptly, almost mid-chuckle, when she spotted me returning, on the arm of Michael Chin. Even from a distance, I could see the dramatic transformation in her expression, shock, then dawning recognition, swiftly followed by frantic calculation. "Isn't that one of the businessmen?" someone murmured beside her, staring at Michael. Madison's eyes darted wildly between us, clearly trying to frantically process why I would be escorted by one of the most influential investors in the tech industry. By the time we reached the doors, she had plastered on her most dazzling, artificial social smile. "Mr. Chin, what an unexpected honor," she gushed, her voice sickeningly sweet, completely ignoring our tense confrontation just minutes before. "We're so delighted you could attend tonight." Michael's response was coolly polite, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the background in "thank you." "I was just having a fascinating conversation with your sister in the garden." "My sister?" Madison repeated, her voice thin, as if suddenly uncertain of our relationship, of her entire reality. "Yes, Miss Sutton and I have several business interests in common," Michael continued, his tone conversational, almost dangerously mild, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I was quite surprised to find her outside rather than enjoying the festivities. Madison's perfect smile faltered, a tiny crack appearing in her facade. "There was a small misunderstanding earlier about the dress code." "Was there?" Michael replied, his voice deceptively mild, almost a purr. "I find Miss Sutton always dresses appropriately for success." "After you, Madam Chairman," he added, with a subtle, unmistakable gesture for me to precede him into the ballroom. The formal title hung in the air like a perfectly placed detonation. I could almost see the gears grinding, clicking, and seizing in Madison's head as she processed the profound implications of Michael's words and his differential attitude toward me. "Madam Chairman," she repeated weakly, a ghost of her former bravado. Without waiting for further discussion, Michael and I walked past her, directly into the main ballroom. The space was opulently decorated with massive crystal chandeliers, intricate ice sculptures, and elaborate floral arrangements that seemed to climb to the heavens. At the far end, David stood on a small stage, microphone in hand, apparently in the middle of a welcome speech. "And I want to thank each of you for contributing to the success of Hayes Manufacturing over these many years," he was saying, his voice booming with forced confidence. "We face some challenges ahead, but with friends and associates like you." His voice, a moment ago so strong, trailed off abruptly as his eyes found me, entering on Michael's arm. Even from across the vast room, I could see the confusion, annoyance, and raw curiosity warring on his face. Several guests turned to follow his gaze, creating a ripple effect of awareness, a growing hush, through the crowd. The room didn't fall completely silent, not exactly, but the sheer volume of conversation noticeably, dramatically decreased. Michael guided me forward, nodding politely to acquaintances as we made our way through the now staring crowd. Every step closer to David felt momentous, as if I were crossing an irreversible threshold from which there would be no return. When we reached the stage, David had descended to floor level, his expression a bewildering mixture of confusion, annoyance, and dawning realization. "Chloe, I thought we discussed." He began, his voice still tinged with the earlier anger. Then he noticed Michael beside me. "Mr. Chin, this is an unexpected pleasure." Michael smiled, a genuinely charming, yet utterly predatory smile. "David, I didn't know the CEO of Neurasync was your daughter. You've been holding out on me." The silence that fell over the nearby guests was absolute, suffocating. David stared at Michael, then at me, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion to utter, horrified disbelief. "I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding," he stammered, an uncomfortable, almost frantic laugh escaping him. "My daughter works in computers, yes, but she's not the chief executive officer and board chairman of Neurasync Technologies, currently valued at over $2 billion, Michael supplied helpfully, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the thick tension. "I assure you, she most certainly is." I should know, as I'm one of the company's major investors. The murmurs that rippled through the crowd confirmed that most guests recognized the company name. Neurasync had been featured in major business publications and tech journals consistently over the past few years, a name synonymous with innovation and immense success. David's face had gone utterly pale, his composure shattered. "Chloe, is this true?" he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. Finding my voice, voice now strong and steady, I nodded. "Yes, Dad. I founded Neurasync 8 years ago. We've grown considerably since then." "But you never said anything," he protested, his voice rising, a raw, wounded sound. "All these years at family dinners, you let us think that I was struggling, that I was unsuccessful?" I finished for him, my gaze unwavering. "Yes, I did. I wanted to see if you could value me for who I am, not what I own or what I've achieved." By now, a significant crowd had gathered around us, a silent, gaping circle, including Eleanor and Madison, who had pushed her way frantically to the front, her face a mask of utter bewilderment. "There's something else you should know," Michael added, clearly savoring his role in this unfolding drama. Neurasync recently acquired a manufacturing company that was facing significant financial difficulties. A company with excellent potential, but outdated management. David's expression shifted again, anew, dawning horror replacing the disbelief as understanding finally clicked into place. "Hayes Manufacturing," he whispered, the words barely audible. "You bought my company." "We acquired it at a fair market price through a shell corporation," I confirmed, my voice purely businesslike now, detached. "The paperwork will be made public next week." It was a sound business decision. Your company has good bones, but needed a new direction. The profound irony of the situation seemed to hit everyone simultaneously. The daughter, who had been judged inadequate, dismissed, and publicly rejected based on her simple clothing, had not only built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing, but had also, quietly, saved her own father's business from collapse. "Perhaps," Michael suggested to the stunned, silent crowd, his voice carrying easily through the hush, "this is a lesson in looking beyond appearances. I've worked with Chloe for years, and I can tell you that her brilliance lies partly in understanding that true quality doesn't need to announce itself with flash and expense." David seemed to be struggling, truly struggling, to process this avalanche of information, his face cycling rapidly through multiple, warring emotions, pride battling with profound embarrassment, revelation clashing with deep-seated shame. Eleanor stepped forward, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide and glistening. "Chloe, darling, why didn't you tell us? Would it have made a difference, Mom?" I asked gently, my voice soft but firm. "Would you have stopped suggesting I needed a makeover? Would Dad have stopped apologizing for my car? Would Madison have stopped making snide comments about my clothes?" No one answered. The silence was deafening, utterly damning. "Success isn't about what you wear or what you drive," I continued, my gaze sweeping across not just my family, but the entire listening, captivated crowd. "It's about creating value, solving problems, treating people with respect, regardless of their appearance or status." David cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of control. "Chloe, your daughter's leadership saved your company from bankruptcy, David," Michael interrupted, his voice cutting and precise. 3 different banks had denied your loan applications. Without Neurasync's intervention, you would have had to close your doors within 3 months. This brutal revelation caused another stir, a collective gasp from the guests. David's business associates exchanged shocked glances, some concerned, others clearly reevaluating their entire perception of both him and me. "I had no idea," David said quietly, his voice a raw whisper of defeat. Madison pushed forward again, her earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a desperate, almost pleading confusion. "But Chloe, if you've been so successful all this time, why live like you do? Why drive a regular car? Why dress so normally?" The question, spoken aloud, revealed how deeply she still, even now, didn't understand. "Because those things don't matter to me, Madison," I explained, my voice gentle. "I don't need to prove my worth through possessions. Eleanor had tears streaming down her face. All this time, we thought you were struggling. No, I corrected her gently, meeting her gaze. You assumed I was struggling because I didn't meet your definition of success. You never actually asked me about my work or my life. You were too busy critiquing it. The orchestra, sensing the unbearable tension, softly, tentatively, began playing again. Gradually, guests, clearly uncomfortable with the raw, intimate nature of our family confrontation, began to drift away, giving us space while undoubtedly continuing to dissect every word of what they'd witnessed. David stood straighter, visibly trying to regain his composure, to reclaim some shred of his old dignity. Well, this is unexpected, he said, his voice still shaky, but I'm proud of you, Chloe. Very proud. The words seemed genuine, if painfully belated. Thank you, I replied, a profound weariness in my soul. But I'm still the same person I was an hour ago, wearing the same clothes you found so embarrassing. That's something to think about. Before he could respond, several business associates, who had previously ignored me entirely, approached, suddenly eager to speak with me now that my true status had been dramatically revealed. The irony, a bitter, palpable thing, wasn't lost on any of us. The next hour passed in a dizzying blur of introductions and conversations. Business associates who had literally turned their backs on me earlier now sought me out, their smiles fixed, their eyes gleaming, desperate to establish connections with the CEO of Neurasync. Their transparent, almost comical, shift in behavior was both amusing and deeply, profoundly disheartening. David moved through the crowd with a strange new demeanor, somewhere between bewildered pride and sheer disorientation. I would catch him looking at me from across the room, his expression a complex, unreadable mixture of admiration, confusion, and, perhaps, a flicker of shame. Madison had transformed most dramatically of all. Gone was the condescending sister who had physically blocked my entrance. In her place was someone almost sickeningly eager, hovering nearby, offering to introduce me to people I already knew intimately through business channels, laughing too loudly at my mildest observations. Chloe, you simply must meet the Andersons, she insisted, tugging excitedly at my arm. They're in biotech, which is practically the same as what you do, right? Neural interface technology is quite different, I corrected her gently. But I actually know Jordan Anderson already. We served on a technology ethics panel together last year. Oh, of course you did, Madison said, her forced smile faltering momentarily before brightening again with renewed, desperate determination. What about the Wilsons? They have a vacation home in Aspen that would be perfect for corporate retreats. Madison, I said, stopping her, my hand on her arm. You don't need to do this. I'm still just your sister. Her perfect facade cracked slightly, a glimpse of vulnerability showing through. But you're not, are you? You're important now. I was always important, I replied quietly, my gaze holding hers. We all are. That's the point you've been missing. After extracting myself from Madison's rather frantic networking attempts, I found myself cornered by David in a small side room off the main ballroom. He closed the door halfway, creating a semblance of privacy. We need to talk, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued, almost a plea. Yes, we do, I agreed, my heart pounding a little harder. He paced a few steps, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, visibly struggling to find the words. Why didn't you tell me all these years? Letting us think you were. He trailed off, the unspoken word hanging heavy in the air. Unsuccessful, I supplied, my voice steady. Because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I've accomplished or acquired. But family is supposed to support each other, he protested, his voice rising slightly, share successes. Family is supposed to love each other unconditionally, I countered, my voice firm, not mock each other's clothes, or cars, or lifestyle choices. He had the grace to look genuinely embarrassed, a rare sight. We weren't mocking you. We were concerned. We just wanted you to present yourself better. Why? I pressed, my voice sharp with years of unspoken resentment. So you wouldn't be embarrassed by me? So I would fit your image of success. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly, the fight gone out of him. Isn't it? Tonight, you literally banned me from your party because of how I looked. Not because I was disruptive or rude, but because my perfectly clean, appropriate clothes weren't expensive enough for your image. He had no response to that, the truth hanging heavy between us. Michael Chen chose that exact moment to join us, perhaps sensing the tension, or perhaps simply having impeccable timing. David, Chloe, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to discuss the transition plan for Hayes Manufacturing now that I've met both of you. David straightened, shifting automatically, almost reflexively, into business mode. Of course, Mr. Chin. Please call me Michael. Michael corrected him gently. He then turned to me. Chloe, I assume you'll want to implement the integration strategy we discussed last week? Yes. With some adjustments based on what I've observed tonight, I replied professionally, a subtle implication in my tone. David looked between us, the stark reality of his new position finally, brutally sinking in. So, you're really my boss now? The words seemed to physically pain him, a deep, bitter pill to swallow. For a man who had built his entire identity around being in charge, this complete reversal of fortune was clearly, utterly difficult to process. Neurasync is the parent company of Hayes Manufacturing, I confirmed, my voice calm, controlled. But we believe in collaborative leadership. Your experience will be valuable during the transition. It was the diplomatic answer, the CEO answer. The daughter in me wanted to say so much more, to unleash the years of dismissal and judgment, but this wasn't the time or place. I see, David said stiffly, his voice devoid of emotion. Well, I suppose I should thank you for saving my company. It was a sound business decision, I replied, echoing my earlier statement, my tone unwavering. Your company has good fundamentals. Michael cleared his throat. David, I've been following your work for years. You built something substantial from nothing. That's commendable. The acquisition isn't a failure on your part. It's an evolution. David seemed to take some small comfort in this perspective, a slight easing in his rigid posture. I appreciate that, Michael. He then turned to me, his gaze softening, a flicker of something new in his eyes. And I owe you an apology, Chloe. About earlier at the entrance. I was wrong. The admission clearly cost him. David rarely, if ever, apologized for anything. Thank you, I said simply, a profound sigh escaping me. That means a lot. When we returned to the main ballroom, the dynamic had shifted palpably. Guests who had witnessed the earlier revelation were watching our family with undisguised interest, a mixture of fascination and gossip in their eyes. Eleanor immediately approached, her expression anxious, almost fearful. Is everything all right? She asked, looking between David and me. We're working on it, I replied honestly, a small, weary smile on my face. She took my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly tight. Chloe, I'm so sorry. All these years, the things I said about your appearance, your career. I thought I was helping. By trying to make me more like Madison? I asked gently, my heart aching. Eleanor winced, a sudden, raw vulnerability in her eyes. I suppose that's exactly what I was doing. I was wrong. Her candor surprised me. Of all my family members, I had least expected my mother to acknowledge her role in the dynamic so readily. It's going to take time, I told her, squeezing her hands, for all of us to adjust. For the remainder of the evening, I navigated the strange landscape between professional networking and raw family reconciliation. Several times, I noticed David responding to questions about me with an awkward mix of newfound pride and lingering shock. My daughter, the CEO, he would say, the phrase still sounding foreign, almost alien, on his tongue. Madison continued her campaign of excessive supportiveness, almost over the top. Though, as the night progressed, I could see cracks in her perfect facade, the effort taking its toll. At one point, I found her alone on the terrace, a champagne flute dangling forgotten from her fingers. All this time, she said when I approached, her voice quiet, almost defeated, I thought I was the successful one. Success isn't a competition, Madison, I reminded her softly. She laughed bitterly, a harsh, humorless sound. In this family, everything's a competition. You know what the worst part is, she continued, her gaze fixed on the glittering lights of the city below. I've spent my whole adult life trying to impress people with things. The right clothes, the right car, the right address. And you didn't bother with any of that. And you're the one they're all impressed by. They're impressed by what I've built. Not by me personally, I pointed out, a cold truth. Still, she sighed, sipping her champagne slowly. It's going to take some getting used to. My little sister, the billionaire tech genius. I'm still just Chloe, I insisted, my voice gentle but firm. That hasn't changed. She gave me a sideways look, a hint of her old self returning. Everything has changed, and you know it. As the party finally wound down, I found myself experiencing a complex, almost overwhelming mixture of emotions. There was vindication, yes, a powerful, satisfying rush of it. But also a deep sadness that it had taken this dramatic, public revelation to earn my family's respect. Had anything really changed in their values, I wondered, or had I simply proven myself according to their materialistic measuring stick after all? I was contemplating this question, standing alone for a moment, when Michael approached to say goodnight. Quite an evening, he observed, his voice rich with understated humor. That's one way to put it, I agreed, a weary smile touching my lips. For what it's worth, he said, his gaze warm, you handled it with grace. Not everyone would have been so measured after being treated that way. Thank you for your part in it, I replied, a genuine gratitude in my voice. Though I suspect you enjoyed the drama more than you're letting on. He smiled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Perhaps a bit. I've always appreciated a good object lesson in not judging books by their covers. He glanced at David, who was now in an earnest, hushed conversation with Eleanor across the room. He'll come around. Might take his pride a while to recover, but he will. I hope so, I said, realizing, with a quiet sincerity, that I genuinely meant it. As I prepared to leave, David approached one last time. You're not staying for the full evening? I have an early meeting tomorrow, I explained, a touch of my old self-defense creeping into my voice. Some of us work Sundays. He nodded, then hesitated, his gaze uncertain, before asking, will you still come to family dinner tomorrow night? The question surprised me, a fragile offering. Do you still want me to? Of course, he said, sounding genuinely confused that I would even ask. You're my family, even in these clothes? I couldn't resist asking, a small, knowing challenge in my voice. He had the grace to look deeply embarrassed, his face coloring. Especially in those clothes. I have a lot to learn from you, it seems. It wasn't a complete transformation, no. I didn't expect decades of materialistic values to dissolve in a single evening, in one dramatic moment. But it was a start, a small, vital crack in the facade that might eventually lead to something more authentic, something real. I'll be there, I promised. Same time as always. 3 months after David's birthday party, I stood at the window of my office at Neurasync headquarters, watching the Seattle skyline glitter in the afternoon sun. So much had changed in such a relatively short time. Yet some days it felt like the revelation had happened in another lifetime. The full acquisition of Hayes Manufacturing had been completed, with David now reporting to a board that I, his daughter, chaired. The transition hadn't been without its challenges, believe me. For a man accustomed to complete autonomy, adjusting to corporate oversight was incredibly difficult. There had been arguments, tense meetings, and on one memorable occasion, David storming out of a strategy session, declaring he would never get used to taking orders from his own daughter. Yet, gradually, almost imperceptibly, he had begun to see the undeniable benefits of our more innovative approach. Hayes Manufacturing was already showing increased productivity and profit margins. More importantly, he was slowly but surely beginning to recognize the true value of substance over appearance, in business as well as in personal relationships. Our weekly family dinners had resumed after a brief hiatus. The first few had been awkward affairs, with conversations stalling around the enormous elephant in the room. Eleanor had tried too hard to express interest in my work, asking technical questions she clearly didn't understand. Madison had swung wildly between obvious jealousy and forced, almost theatrical admiration. David had seemed utterly lost, unsure how to relate to me as both his daughter and his formidable boss. But week by week, meal by meal, a new dynamic had begun to emerge. Not perfect, not without friction, but undeniably more honest than before. A knock at my office door interrupted my reflections. My assistant, Rachel, poked her head in. "Your 4 is here. It's your father." "Thank you, Rachel." "Send him in." David entered, looking both familiar and subtly changed. He still wore an expensive suit, but there was a subtly different energy about him, less rigid, perhaps more open. "Chloe," he greeted me, no longer uncomfortable using my name in a professional context. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all. Have a seat." He settled into the chair across from my desk, glancing around the office he'd visited several times now, but still seemed to find impressively awe-inspiring. "The Jenkins contract came through," he announced, a genuine excitement in his voice. "Thought you'd want to know right away." "That's excellent news," I replied, genuinely pleased. The Jenkins account had been his project, one I'd supported despite some board skepticism. "Congratulations. Your faith in the project made it possible," he acknowledged, a concession that would have been unthinkable just 3 months ago. We discussed business for a while, the easy back and forth of professionals who respected each other's expertise. It was, perhaps, the most comfortable dynamic we'd ever established. As our meeting concluded, he hesitated, then said, "Your mother wants me to remind you about dinner tonight. Apparently, Madison has news." "I'll be there," I promised. He nodded, then added with a hint of his old gruffness, "And don't work too late." Success isn't just about business. The irony of him offering this advice wasn't lost on either of us. I smiled. "I learned that lesson a long time ago, Dad." After he left, I reflected on how our family had evolved. There had been a particularly significant moment about a month after the party. We were at a restaurant when a business associate stopped by our table and made a snide comment about my casual attire. To my utter shock, David had immediately defended me. "My daughter dresses for comfort and practicality," he'd said, his voice firm. "When you're as successful as she is, you don't need to prove anything with your clothes." The moment had been small, almost fleeting, but profoundly meaningful, a tangible sign that perhaps he was truly beginning to understand. Madison's transformation had been more complicated. Initially, she had swung to the opposite extreme, showing up to family dinner in jeans and a plain sweater, an obvious overcorrection that looked as unnatural on her as a ball gown would have on me. "You don't need to change who you are," I had told her privately. "There's nothing wrong with enjoying fashion and beauty if that's authentic to you." The problem was judging others by those standards. She had seemed genuinely surprised by this perspective. "But I thought you hated all that stuff," she'd exclaimed. "It's not for me," I had clarified, "but that doesn't make it wrong. The issue was never your designer dresses, Madison. It was your designer judgment." Slowly, she had found a middle ground, still stylish, but less obsessed with labels and status symbols. More surprisingly, she had begun asking thoughtful questions about my work and career path. Last week, she'd even requested my advice about a small business idea she was considering, a boutique focused on sustainable fashion. Eleanor, perhaps the most adaptable of the family, had undergone her own quiet evolution. She had admitted, during a private lunch, that she had always been deeply insecure about the family's sudden wealth. "I never quite felt I belonged in that world," she confessed, her voice soft with long-held vulnerability. "Following all those unwritten rules about what to wear and how to act felt like the only way to avoid being exposed as an imposter." "I understand that feeling better than you might think," I had told her, a newfound empathy in my voice. "In tech, I'm often the only woman in a room full of men who assume I don't belong there." That conversation had been a quiet turning point for us, a recognition of shared vulnerability beneath our very different external presentations. My phone buzzed, bringing me back to the present. It was a text from Sophia. "Dinner at your parents' tonight? Want me to be on standby with an emergency work crisis in case you need an escape?" I smiled and typed back, "Thanks, but I think we're making progress. Though, keep that offer open for the holidays." As I gathered my things to leave for the day, I reflected on the powerful lessons of the past few months. My family was far from perfect. The materialistic values ingrained over decades wouldn't simply disappear overnight. But there was now at least an awareness, an opening for something more authentic, more human. The night of David's party had been painful, yes, but undeniably necessary. It had shattered the illusion that I needed external validation to be worthy, while paradoxically creating space for my family to begin seeing me as I truly was. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house in my usual jeans and a simple top. David opened the door, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face, and welcomed me with a heartfelt hug. "Everyone's in the living room," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Madison's boyfriend just proposed. That was her big news." "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for my sister. As we walked toward the living room, he added quietly, his voice lower, more earnest, "You know, I'm proud of you, Chloe. Not because of your company or your success, but because of who you are. Your integrity." It took me too long to see that. The words weren't perfect, and our relationship would never be without its complications. But in that singular, precious moment, I felt something I had been seeking for years. Acceptance for who I truly was, not what I owned or had achieved. True worth, I had learned, never comes from external validation or fleeting material possessions. It comes from living authentically, from creating genuine value in the world, and from having the courage, the fierce, unwavering courage to be yourself, even when others judge you for it. As I joined my family in the living room, I knew that regardless of what clothes I wore or car I drove, I was finally, truly, being seen for who I really was. And that, my friends, was worth more than any designer label could ever be. So, what about you? Have you ever been judged based on appearances rather than your true worth? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to know how you handled it, and if you found something valuable in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life experiences. Remember, your worth isn't determined by what you wear or own, but by who you are at heart. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.